Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 247 DIY. In a previous episode, you saw we went ahead and we replaced the battery on my old Craftsman 917 mower. And after scoring a pretty good deal on Facebook Marketplace, I picked up this 42-inch snowblower attachment for it. So I'm going to be releasing a bit of a series of videos. First up, we're just going to be going ahead and doing some maintenance on this tractor. It's definitely not the newest tractor in the world. It's a 01 model and it needs quite a bit of TLC. So first up, we're just going to go ahead and do a little bit of an overhaul. I'm not going to go crazy because this is, again, it's just going to be turned into a dedicated snow blowing mower. So everything for this is going to be budget minded. And then once we've got it fixed up a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and work on getting the snowblower attachment hooked up. The only problem with that is the reason I got such a good deal on this is the individual selling it sold their mower not realizing that the brackets that you need to mount everything to it were still attached to the mower. So I have sourced the brackets that I needed, but it's going to be a little bit of a job to go ahead and get this hooked up. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the first thing we need to do to give this thing a little bit of an update. So in this video, we're going to be going ahead and replacing the valve cover gasket on this mower. I have noticed in the past small little puffs of smoke while I was mowing. Honestly, I thought that it was just the belt slipping a little bit and so you get a little puff of smoke. And then I let the mower sit over the winter when I didn't need it and went to go fire it up and it was smoking like crazy. I panicked a little bit at first, thought maybe, the head gasket had blown on it and it was just, passing oil and burning it up. But then upon closer inspection, I realized it was just the valve cover gasket here was leaking and just dripping oil down onto the muffler and causing a whole bunch of smoke. So upon further investigation, I did realize that it must have been leaking or at least seeping for quite a while. There was a ton of oil buildup all in this area around the valve cover and where it meets the head. So I've already taken this up. That's why the hood's off. Took it up outside the barn here, sprayed it down with a whole bunch of degreaser on the front end, and then just sprayed everything down on the front, brushed some of it off, and got everything cleaned up because we really need to start with a clean surface here so that we don't introduce any dirt, debris, or anything inside of the engine. So I'm going to go ahead and use a 10 millimeter here. These are actually standard bolts, so 10 millimeter is a little bit loose, but I'm being a little bit lazy. I don't feel like going and finding a standard set of sockets right now. 10 millimeter should work fine. And then your cover should come right off. In this case, I have a gasket. That makes cleanup on the head side a bit easier. There's usually no residue. We'll come in with a little bit of brake clean. We'll clean that up. This can be a little bit challenging here on the cover because it tends to kind of glue and bake itself on there. So we'll scrape that off. Now, I do know in newer models, Briggs and Stratton is starting to use only RTV sealant. So generally, it's just a good idea to replace like material. So because this has a gasket, I've ordered a new gasket. We're going to replace it with a gasket. If it had RTV, if yours has RTV, go ahead and replace it with RTV. Pretty much anything from the Permatex line that's going to be oil resistant is going to be a great choice to use. Honda Bond also works well. But let's go ahead and we'll get these areas cleaned up and we'll get the new gasket on there. All right, so I went ahead and pulled the old gasket off. Really didn't need too much of a razor blade at all. If you're scraping RTV off, just remember your valve cover is steel, so it's a little bit more forgiving with a steel razor blade, but your head here is aluminum. You want to be very careful not to gouge the surfaces. That's going to go for any, head gasket or you're working with aluminum. If you gouge that surface, then you're pretty much going to create a leak. You also want to come in down here underneath on this bottom edge. You'll get some pooling of oil. Just get your paper towel, your rag up in there and soak up all that loose oil, especially if you're using RTV. If you get it dripping down there, it will contaminate that RTV and you'll have a premature failure of that sealant. But with a gasket, that same situation can happen. You can have premature failure if you were to seal or pinch oil against the gasket on there. It wouldn't leak at first, but down the road it very well could create a premature failure. So we've got that all cleaned up with a little bit of brake clean, and it wasn't too terribly expensive, so I just went with a genuine Briggs and Stratton gasket here. I'll leave the part number below. This is a 14.5 horsepower Briggs and Stratton engine. Just kind of line your gasket up with the holes there. And I'm just going to use the impact here just to seat these bolts. And we'll come back with hand tools to hand tighten these down. You don't want to accidentally strip these out of the aluminum by using an impact here. And one thing I didn't do here that I was going to do, it actually can be very beneficial to put a little bit of blue Loctite on these bolts. Obviously, you know, these mowers being on a solid frame, they transfer a lot of vibrations around, and these bolts can actually vibrate a little bit loose. So if you're doing this, don't be afraid to throw a little bit of Loctite on those bolts. I'll just have to put it in the back of my mind and just keep checking these every once in a while and make sure that they're not loosening up. So that's one item checked off the list. As you can see, it's really not too big a deal at all to go ahead and change this valve cover gasket out. It's actually a very simple process. So if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit that like button. Feel free to leave a comment below. And if you're not subscribed already, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on the next episode, where we're gonna go ahead and replace out these front leaky tires, as well as doing a bit of an upgrade at the same time. So I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.